little numbers next to the sentences are the verse number. So we're going to be reading, firstly, we'll start on page 84, and we'll read chapter 15 right at the beginning. The big number is the 15 there, hopefully you see it. So it says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering round to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" Now, if you go back a slide, just if there's anyone here, there's a QR code. If you're wanting to know the Bible, and maybe English isn't your first language, you can scan that, and it will take you to an online page that will take you to the Bible, and you can search for it in your language. So that's an option for you as well, so if you can't read this book. But let's look at that scene. So let me just this is a recap from last night. If anyone was not here last night, we're looking at the same story. Let me describe the scene to you. Jesus is here, and the New Testament has made very clear to the reader who's got this book, by now you would know this is God. This man standing here is God, the one acceptance I really need. Right? So it's a big deal. What's Jesus going to do? And there's two groups in front of him. So on this side, we've got the tax collectors and sinners. Now, how does that relate to shame? Well, they are the lowest of the low. They've messed up, and everyone's looking down on them. To give a modern-day example, think of a rapist. Think of a racist. We could name some. I'm not saying they're the same, but it was how society viewed them. That was the same. They were disgusting. People would look down on them. And then on this side, you've got another group, which are the religious people, the good people, that they were looked up to in society, the model people. I wish I was like them. They prayed, they gave to charity, they had no shame. They were accepted. So complete contrast. But what's going on here is you would have expected Jesus to be associated with these people, but in fact, it's the people that are disgusting in people's eyes that are coming to Jesus, and he's accepting them. He's welcoming them. And these people are like, what? He eats with these lot? He's a friend to them? So it's turning our view upside down of shame. And Jesus explains why, and he tells a story. So we go to the next slide. Hopefully we'll see that story. So before we get into the story, let's just note that it begins with a man who had two sons. Now, let me just set the scene. There's two groups of people. One of them is going to be one of the sons, one of them is going to be the other son. Jesus is telling a story that the listeners were in, right? We're focusing on the first son today, who represents these poor people over here. That's what we're looking at. And the father in the story, there was a man who had two sons. The father is God. So that's our kind of key for understanding this story. So let's start. And this is going to give hope for anyone who's in shame, anyone who's suffering from shame. So the first thing I want us to look at that Jesus reveals is how we ended up in shame. Where did it come from? Why are we suffering with these feelings? That's what this story is going to reveal to us. Now, note where it begins. A man who had two sons. Picture the scene. A father, two kids, love, laughter, acceptance. They did what their dad said. It's a beautiful family home, yeah? And Jesus is saying, that's the way we were supposed to be with God, basically. We're supposed to know God like a father. We're supposed to know his love no matter what. We're supposed to be ourselves with him, just like a child is with their dad. No shame. We're supposed to live in a way that pleases him, just like you would want to please your earthly dad, right? So that's the picture Jesus gives us. That's where we're supposed to be. And if that was our existence, there would be no shame. It's interesting that the third chapter of the Bible in Genesis, Adam and Eve, I'm sure you've heard of them. What does it say about them in the beginning? They were naked and not ashamed. That says they had nothing to hide. Not ashamed. There was no shame. They were with God. It's like this. It's just like this picture. Jesus says, that's where we're supposed to be. But something happened. Let's carry on with the story. The younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Do you get the sense of what's going on there? Imagine if you did this in real life. You've got an inheritance coming to you, and you said to your dad, "Give me it now." How do you think your dad would respond to that? Even in today's culture, it's shocking, but times it by, I don't know, I was going to say infinity, but that's maybe dramatic. Times it by 1,000, and you might get a sense of how it was then, because that was an honor-shame culture. You would honor your dad. You don't want to bring shame on your dad. This guy, this son, is utterly shaming his dad. He's saying, "Give me what's coming to me. I don't want you. You're better off dead, actually, because I want what's coming to me now." That's essentially what he's saying. And Jesus is saying, that's what we've done with God. We're happy to take his stuff. So I'll take everything God gives me, breath, eyes, food, this lovely life in this world, but I don't want him. I don't want you, God. I want your stuff, though. I'll happily take your stuff. It's a picture of sin. Maybe you've wondered what sin is. Well, this is a strong picture of sin. It's a rejection of God. I don't want you, but I'll happily live for the stuff that you've made instead. So that's this idea of shame. We bring in shame, surely. So it's a shocking thing to do. But it continues, verse 13. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country. So he leaves God now. And a distant country, what is that? It's not a location in this world. It's not a physical place. It's a place we go in our hearts. It's a mindset. It's this decision that we make where we say, "God, you're not going to rule my life. It's my life, my rules." It's living as if God doesn't exist. That's what this son did. He went to a distant country as if his father didn't exist, and he did what he wanted. Again, Jesus is showing us what sin really is. It's shameful. Do you know the listeners at the time of this story would be like, "This son is disgusting. He's bringing utter shame on that family. How dare he?" How much more the God who made all of us? Jesus is trying to make us shocked here at what sin really is. But then it says another word. The end of that verse, "And there he squandered his wealth in wild living." He had no limits. Wild. He went wild. Now, just imagine if you had all the money in the world for a day and you could do what you wanted and no one would find out. That's the kind of thing the son was doing. No limits. No one could see. He did what he wanted. It's a distant country. No dad to tell him what to do. He went wild. It captures what this life does, that when you live for yourself, you go further and further in. You go wild because I've tried a bit, that didn't work. Okay, I'm doing that. I think you've seen that. Maybe the alcoholic. They began with one drink, but one drink wasn't enough. And now they're doing things they never thought they would do. They're living off drink. Or the porn addict. He started off with one click that watched something, and then now he's watching things he never thought he would. And it's wild. Jesus is capturing this life away from God. It sucks you in, and it makes you go above and beyond what you ever thought you would do. Okay, but we must say at this point, he's having a great time. Jesus doesn't pretend that this life that he's describing isn't pleasurable. This son is having a great time. Can you picture it? Partying, friends around him. He's not feeling shame. Even if there is shame, he doesn't care. So Jesus is saying, yes, this life is fun. It's pleasurable. Maybe you're sitting there and you're thinking, I love this idea. Doing what I want, when I want. Who cares about shame? Keep looking. We'll go to the next slide. The story continues, and Jesus really captures shame now. He really captures the shame that follows sin. So let's continue reading. Verse 14, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. Now, let's just go through that. Firstly, he's left empty. Famines, he spent everything. He began to be in need. It ran out. No money. What do I do now? It captures this idea that this lifestyle of living away from God is temporary. It runs out. You're left empty. I think you taste that maybe the morning after the night before. If you go out drinking, clubbing like I used to do, the morning after you're like, what was that? Why did I do that? What did I do? Oh, I can't believe I said that. There's loads of examples I could give, but there's that sense of just, the wake-up moment. Empty. I can't believe I did all of that. Okay? It says he hires himself out. That captures this sense that we're not in control of ourselves. He has to hire himself out now. He's not free. He thought he was going to be free. Now he's working like a slave. But then this is the bit. Pigsty. He's in a pigsty. Do you know, I think even today, we're bacon lovers, maybe some of us. We love bacon. We love pork. We would struggle with this. He's living in a pigsty. He's lower than the pigs because he wants to be fed with what they're being fed with. He's not even being treated the same level as pigs. In that culture, pigs was the most unclean animal you could imagine. The listeners at this time, listening to Jesus, their stomachs would be turning. He's in a pigsty. He can't get lower. This is the lowest of the low. I think what's happening here is Jesus is capturing this sense of sin makes you feel dirty. This sense of shame is connected to this sense of feeling dirty. I don't know if you felt that. I know a story of a boy that became a Christian at university, and before he found Christ, he felt so dirty, he literally got in a shower and tried to wash himself to get rid of it. And he didn't, it was underneath, he couldn't get rid of it. Can you relate? That's the picture Jesus is painting here that we've all somehow ended up in. I don't know if you can relate. But there's one more thing. He's left alone. Did you notice it says no one gave him anything? I can imagine when he had all the money, he was surrounded. The minute he's in need, no one cares. He's lonely. It captures this cold life, living life away from God, lonely, in shame. No one cares about you. But there's one more thing. In verse 17, the boy says, "Here I am, starving to death." Jesus says this is where this life leads. This life of shame, this life of sin. In other translations, the word is perish. So this isn't just a physical death. We're talking about hell. It's a horrible picture Jesus is painting. And the worst thing is, it's hopeless. Do you know what would have been said about him in that day? There's no hope for him. He's messed up. He deserves to be shunned. He deserves to be outcasted. There is no hope for such a boy. And we still do the same today. Cancel culture, dare I say. How do we treat someone that's messed up? You cancel them. That's what you do. No hope. Rock bottom, this boy is. Again, do you feel this? I just wonder if there's someone listening today who can relate to this maybe more than others. I wonder, because I was there. We'll keep listening. Because secondly now, if we go to the next one, Jesus starts to show a way out of shame. There's a way out. I get to stand here as one who's been free from shame, even though I lived a terrible life. Let me tell you the way out. There's 4 steps. Do you know Jesus makes it so simple for us? He shows us 4 steps out of shame. The first thing this son does is, verse 17, he sees. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death?" He comes to his senses. He wakes up. He sees the mess he's in. How did I end up here? And my father's house, that's where I should be. Have you had that moment where you've realized, living for myself, where has it got me? What about God? Could there be a place for me back home. Have you had that moment? He sees. Verse 8, but more, he comes home. Do you notice he says, so he got up and went to his father. I'm going to argue that he had faith there. Think about it, all that he did, and he gets up and comes home, hoping that his dad's going to take him back. That culture would have said, don't you bother going home. Don't you bother. But he has faith. He hasn't seen his father's response yet, but he's got faith. Maybe, just maybe, my dad might take me home. There's faith there. But thirdly, third step, so there's see, believe, but thirdly, he leaves. That's important. He actually leaves the pigsty. We're talking about a way out of shame. You have to leave the pigsty. I think the problem some of us have is we want both. We want the lifestyle away from God, sin, but we also want God at the same time. And this message is, no, you have to leave that life. It's this idea of repentance. So that's a key step in leaving shame. We can't be in two places at once. But fourth step, he confesses. This is the moment. He plans what he's going to say. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Don't you think that's important? If I'm ever going to be accepted by the Father again, confession's got to be key, right? Imagine if I wronged you, right? And you knew it and I knew it. And I never said sorry. I never said anything. How could that relationship ever be restored until I came out? The same is true with God. So Jesus has given us 4 simple steps back home. But still, at this point, this crowd over here, the Pharisees, this boy can come home all he likes. Don't expect a good reception. And I think the same is true today. Our culture is very different to this culture, but you could say our parents are softies. The worst we'll get maybe is no PlayStation, maybe for a night. But I still think we wouldn't expect what we're about to read. So let's go to the third slide, the next slide. Can I call this the true antidote to shame? This is the remedy, what you're about to read right now. Remember, this picture's God. I find this amazing. I hope I never get over what's written here. This is God. Let's read it. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. What does that say? It says that the father has been waiting, looking out the window for his son to come home. That's the first thing. But here's the bit. Saw him and was filled with compassion for him. The first response of the father is not anger, but compassion. If you were this day to get up and come back to God, no matter what you've done, the first response that God will feel for you, according to this, is compassion. What does compassion mean? Pity. Oh, my poor son, my poor daughter. Isn't that beautiful? That's the first thing God will feel. We don't expect that, do we? But that's what Jesus is saying. Let's keep going. It gets more shocking. He ran to his son. Now, in that day, old men wouldn't be seen running. Just picture them. They had the long robes, so they'd have to pick up their robe and run like that. It was shameful for an old man to be seen running. This dad doesn't care. He sprints to his son. Can you imagine that? God running to meet you. You take one step and you're ready to say, Lord, I'm sorry. And he's already sprinting to meet you. This is beautiful. And then there's more. What happens when he runs? He threw his arms around him and kisses him. Just picture, the son is in pig filth. The father doesn't care. We're covered in sin. God still throws his arms around us. This is shocking stuff. Can you imagine being hugged by God? I can say that I've experienced that in my life. Jesus says this is what to expect if you were to come home to God, even now. But here's the bit. It continues. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So the son now says his prepared speech. But he doesn't finish it. He doesn't get to say the words, "Take me back as one of your servants." He doesn't get to say that. The Father interrupts. What does the Father say? "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet." Why is he doing that? Because all of those things, sandals, ring, robe, all communicated this wonderful message: you are my son. Do you know in that day that's what sons wore? That separated them from servants. So the Father is saying, don't you dare ever think I would take you as a servant. You are my son. It doesn't matter what you've done. This is picturing God. But there's more. Where is it? Verse 24. So they began to celebrate. As the story goes on, there's music and dancing. This is saying God is so happy when you come home that he is so overjoyed. I could safely say there's a party going on in heaven when a sinner comes home. This is God. I think we have such wrong views of God. Can I be honest and say, if this wasn't Jesus saying this, if this wasn't written in this New Testament, I don't think I would believe that this was true, if I'm honest. But because Jesus says it and he knows the Father best, I'm taking him at his word. And I've tasted it for myself. So, do you believe it? Because that's the key. You won't come home unless you believe this. So, can I say deal with an obvious objection at this point? There is an objection at this point that we must deal with. If you know anything about the Bible, the obvious thing that would be said at this point that the Pharisees probably would have been thinking is, God is supposed to be holy. He's supposed to be just. He's supposed to be against evil. He's supposed to punish wrongdoing. How can God just receive a terrible person? Remember who this is picturing? The worst of the worst that I've listed, that are still existing today. How can he just welcome them, hug them, and everything's fine? Well, I think we find the answer. If you were to read this on your own, you would go on a few chapters, and you'd get to chapter 19, and you'd hear Jesus say, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Jesus is saying, me, I'm the Son of Man. I came to seek and save the lost, like these poor sons over here. We're learning by chapter 19 that Jesus plays a role in this whole thing, right? You keep on going, and you get to the end of Luke's gospel, and you find another pigsty, but a worse pigsty than what we just read about. There's a cross in the middle of it, the ultimate place of shame that you could ever think of. And who's there? Jesus, the Son of God, the only innocent one, the only obedient one, the one who never deserved to be in such a place. Yet he's hanging there naked, put to shame, people mocking him. He cries, my God, why have you forsaken me? He faces the rejection of the Father. He's treated as the worst of sinners. Why? Because he's taken my rejection. He's taken my shame and yours. So that we, when we get up and come home like this son does, can receive the welcome that we just read about. So what I'm basically saying is Jesus makes such a welcome like this possible. It would never have been possible otherwise. But Jesus took all the shame away, all the rejection, all the sin. Do you get it? More than that, he rises from the dead 3 days later. Do you know why the resurrection's key? Because it says to you, you can have a new beginning with God. A new you, the old you dead. It's a beautiful message. Shame, this is the antidote to shame. We sung a verse earlier this morning as a CU. When Satan tempts me to despair and tells me of the guilt within, upwards I look and see him there, that's Jesus, who made an end of all my sin. This is the beautiful message of Christianity, the antidote to shame. Can I summarize it? God sees me at my worst. He knows all the hidden things about me that I'd hate for you guys to know. And yet he accepts and loves me because of what Jesus did for me. This is my favorite thing about being a Christian, by the way. God knows me better than any of you. The worst parts about me, I can tell him everything. I can tell him the most embarrassing things. God, I thought that, I said that, and I know I'm coming home to welcome. I know I'm accepted. I have a true friend that never leaves me. This is what we long for. The love of God is like nothing else you'll find on this earth. And I think our shame would melt away if you were to know something of this. Your shame would be gone. So I must ask as we close, are you far from home now? Maybe some of you are in the far country right now. You're living it up. It's great fun, but there's that emptiness that we read about. Maybe others here are in the pigsty, literally. You feel shame, you're alone, and it's all a secret, and no one knows, and you're carrying things that no one knows. Jesus says to all of us now, no matter what you've done, how many times, come home. I've opened the way. I've died to make it possible. You just need to see like this son did. See that you've messed up. Leave it behind. Trust in what I've done. And confess with your mouth to God. It's so simple. And he's even given you a model prayer to pray in this story, which I can read. It's so simple. Father, I've sinned against you. Will you confess? Things could change the moment that you do. Can I end with a little push? The son could have sat in that pigsty for days. He could have said, maybe tomorrow won't be so bad. I'll hold out. But he got up and did it. So can I encourage you, don't just sit and say, yeah, this has affected me. Maybe I'll do it next week. Next week will never come. If you keep putting it off, can I encourage you, this son was urgent. He said, he says, I perish. If I stay here, I'm starving to death. I'm coming home. Can I encourage you to be urgent with this? You might not get another opportunity. God says elsewhere in the Bible, seek the Lord while he may be found. He can be found today. He's calling you today. So thank you for listening. I just want to say that if you've been affected by this, please do come and talk, because I've found this for myself. Please do take the Bibles with you. You'll constantly find more and more to help you with these things. The Bible is full of answers for your issues of shame and guilt. And please do call on the Lord. He's ready to listen. I'll hand over to the hosts.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Joe. I hope that's maybe brought up some things to you guys to think about with that. I really encourage you guys to have chats with the people that you've sat next to. I believe we're going to have a QR code come up now. And just please do scan that if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask. And we're going to dive into a bit of a time of Q&A shortly. So yeah.
Super size, sweetie and some lemonade. You love it, it's crazy.
he invites us. He lets us go. He didn't stop that sun from going off when he said, give me my inheritance. He lets us go. He also invites us back, but doesn't force us back.
Thank you so much for that. The next question is, someone is asking, do you have any advice when you repent, but you go back to your sinful ways afterwards?
Yeah, I can speak about that from personal experience. Every Christian will relate to this. So this is the reality of the Christian life. If there's someone sitting here who's not a Christian, this is what Christians go through. And you'll find it in the Bible. Peter denies Jesus 3 times after following him for 3 years. You'll find it all over the scriptures. Believers, King David, commits adultery, leads to murder. He lives almost a year, I think, in unrepentant, you could say. So this is a common Christian experience. My own experience with this is I had one particular sin that I kept going back to as a Christian. Repented, came back again, repented. Oh, Lord, I've done it again. Horrible cycle. Can I give some advice on that? If that's you, I would say don't give up coming to God. I think that's why we have parables like this, to constantly say to you, his arms are always open. The lie of the enemy will say, you can't come back now. It's too much. You've done this 10 times. So never listen to that. Because if you listen to that, you stay away, and that in itself keeps you in it. But the minute you come back to God afresh, Lord, I've done it again, but your son died for me. Thank you. I don't want to do that again. And you truly mean it. I think over time, change happens as you do that. That's what happened with me. Share it with Christian friends that you can trust. I think that helps. I think if you keep it in the dark and it's just you, I think accountability does help. But I think that regular coming back to God, keeping it short. You don't let days go past. When I would fall into sin, I would run to God immediately. Lord, here I am again. And somehow over time, can I give hope? He can deliver you out of it. I've had experiences of being taken out of sins, which I thought I would have to deal with my whole Christian life. So don't think this is just going to be me for the rest of my life. I just have to keep in this cycle. He can lift you out. He really can. Trust in his power, but it's his spirit that will do it ultimately. So depend upon him and keep coming to him.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Jay. That's really encouraging. We've got another great question that's come through. It says, if we keep going back to the pigsty, does God stop welcoming us home?
I could safely say, every time you come home, his arms are open. The issue is not coming home. So I can safely say, no matter how many times you've gone to the pigsty, if you come home, you will receive this response. It's the coming home. It's in the coming home that you find it. God's always been there waiting. The problem is we don't come and receive it. So I can safely say, as long as you are here on this earth, in the pigsty, there is a way home. That's what this parable says.
Thank you for that encouragement. Now, there's a couple of similar ones come in. So, did Christ ever have sinful thoughts, and did Jesus feel shame?
Interesting. There's a distinction between the two. So we read that Christ never sinned. He's innocent, fully innocent, never once sinned. He was tempted, but that's a different thing to sinning. You can be tempted and not sin. So we must keep that distinction very clear. It's very important that Christ was innocent and sinless, because our salvation depends on that. If he had his own sins, he would have had to die for his own sins, and there was no salvation for us. So it's really important. But did he feel shame on the cross? I would say he felt the full weight of our sinful experience as an innocent person. He felt the full weight, the full consequences of all that our sin brings. He felt it from people. He was mocked. He said, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" I can say this. He faced our hell on the cross. I can't get my head around this, but he suffered everything that my sin brings, even hell, in those hours on the cross. Can you imagine what he went through? Not just me, but everyone who would ever believe. It's mind-blowing. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Joe. unfortunately, because of time, we're going to draw our Q&A to a close there. But there's been so many great questions. So if you have something that you haven't been able to ask, ourselves and Joe are going to be around for ages now. So do grab one of us, have a chat, but also speak to the person who maybe brought you along, the person that maybe you're unfortunately or pleasantly sat next to, and continue these conversations. We're going to have a great time now where you can just chill in the space, continue conversations, or head out back to the marquee that we've got. We're going to have some snacks there as well. We just really encourage you, keep this time, keep the conversations going, and do grab us for a chat if you'd like afterwards. But yeah, we just got a couple other things to put forward for you. So should we have a look at those? Yeah, so a couple of things we'd just like to flag for you. Just as Joe mentioned, we have these books that were with you on your chairs. These are a gift for you guys, so please do take these with you as you head off. There's also, I'd love to give an amazing shout out to our bookstall over there. Can you give us a wave, guys? Yeah, they're lovely, some smiley faces there. Do go chat to them afterwards. They've got so many great books for you. So if there's any questions that you've got, maybe you've got, in fact, a question up there that didn't get answered, there's some great books there that will dive into those for you.
So just to also flag up, alongside the New Testaments on the chairs, we also have these flyers, which just go into a bit more detail about what the CU does on a weekly basis. It covers our main meeting, our international cafe, to which everybody is welcome, and smaller groups where if you're not so sure about coming to a massive meeting, you might just want to meet up with like 5 or 6 of the people throughout the week to explore the Bible, and you'd be more than welcome, whether you're a Christian or not, to attend any of these.
Yeah, that's really good. So we definitely really encourage you guys to come along to that. Unfortunately, we are coming towards the end of our events week, but that doesn't mean that we stop doing stuff, and we love to invite you along to everything that we do. However, with that being said, we do still have some great stuff on this week. So like I said, there's some snacks, a load of great food. I've heard there's some great baking and stuff.
Muffins, chocolate brownies, and a crumb cake, I think.
Sounds pretty good to me. I will be
good.
out there, so
It
you
tastes
come
good.
join me, because there's going to be some great stuff there. And that's going to bring us into our time this evening. At 6:30, we're going to have a talk looking at hope in a world of religions, the uniqueness of Jesus, and what really makes this faith that we have something special. So we definitely love to invite you guys along to that. So stick around. There's going to be some music here afterwards, I think. So just come along for that. Have a good time. And we'll have a talk and a free dinner with that. And we've got some amazing events on tomorrow, which we'd love to invite you guys along to. There's these flyers around. You've probably seen loads of them around uni at this point. So please do come along for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Yeah, and we'll see you again later. Thank you, guys.